Welcome to Wire Guild. This tutorial is a gemstone hearts pendant, but we've made it with square wire, so you're going to need 21 gauge square wire, half hard or dead soft, doesn't really matter in this case. Some 21 gauge half round wire, that's our binding wire that we're going to need to hold the whole thing together. I've used a 6mm bezelite setting and an equivalent 6mm gemstone. Now, if you can't get hold of those, you can just put a bead on this. A nice flattish bead would look really, really good. So I'm starting off with my square wire, and I've just a smallish amount. I've got about 7 inches here. Now, if you want a much larger heart, obviously take a longer length of wire and make a bigger heart, but I quite like this size. So there we go, about 7 inch, and I'm going to the halfway point. So the 3.5 inch point. And then I'll just grip that with my fingers and then get my flat ended pliers. And I'm on one of the flat faces because again, this is square wire, so I don't want to be on a point. And I'm going to put a little bend in, just a little corner bend. Can you just see there? Let's see if I can get it better for you so you can have a look. Just a nice little corner. I haven't gone too far because I'll end up with the shape of the pliers, and then I'm just going to bring all that together and then pop my pliers over the top and slowly, quite easily, gently squeeze that together so that we're going to get a piece of wire which is doubled. Now I've got a little kink there, so I'm just going to straighten that up and make that nice and neat. Lovely. So you've got one piece of wire folded in half with a little bend at the end. This is quite important because we're using really quite a lightweight wire, and that bend will add structure and strength to the piece that we're making. If you choose to create a design that doesn't have it in, I need a ring mandrel, but if you don't have a ring mandrel, use a pen or a pencil or anything round, a dowel, something like that, for the next part of the design. Like I was saying though, if you're just going to do a circle, it won't be as strong because we've got that point in. Now I'm opening these wires out, so away from each other. I don't want to twist that point there. I want to keep that nice and flat, and I want these wires to move out from the left and right of that point. Then I will put the ring mandrel into the middle, or if you haven't got one, a large marker pen or a big fat knitting needle, anything that's round, anything at all. Lipstick tube would do really, really well. And I'm going to close the wires around it like that. Now let me just slide this off. So you've got what looks like 2 teardrop shapes. Now if I get hold of the wires now and just gently separate them, you'll see how that pulls into a heart shape. Perfect heart shape every time. No worries about one side being bigger than the other or anything like that. Now, can you see where these wires cross? That one, just there. That is where I want to grip with my pliers because I want this wire here that's coming downwards to go upwards. Because that's going to make our bails. So I'm going to grip just where the wires cross. I want to be on a flat face. You just see that the light's catching it with it being square, you see it sort of glints off. And I'm going to bend that up. There we go, so that's our first side. Now then, let me just have a little wriggle. I've just got it not quite true, so I can bring that in a little further. Of course then it moves where the other side needs to be, because these two sides need to meet perfectly. So because I moved that first side in, the one that I bent up, I just need to move this side in a little bit, and then I will grip with my pliers again on a flat face at the point where the 2 wires would meet, and then I can bend the wire upwards. I'm not bending with the pliers, you notice. I'm bending the wire using my fingers, but using the pliers as a point that stays straight. Now I can put my wires together side by side and just wriggle until I've got that nice and even. If you want your heart more asymmetrical shaped, you could have left it so that it wasn't even. Now, half round wire, 21 gauge half round. I have a domed side and I have a flat side. We need the flat side, this one, against the body of the pendant when we're wrapping it, because that is the bit that's going to hold everything together. Now these two wires that are going up are going to make our bails. They're going to be the part that the chain goes through so that we can hang it as a pendant. So round nose pliers, or bail pliers if you have them, round nose works fine. And I'm just going to grip, I'm a little bit up from the pendant, and I'm going to bend the wires back over the pliers. Remember, I'm not bending with the pliers. I'm not using the pliers to bend the wire. I'm using my fingers to bend the wire over the pliers. There we go. Now, can you see how this wire, now we've bent it, comes sort of out of the front of the pendant? That's no good. You don't want that. So I'm just going to take my flat pliers and I'm going to grip just before I want the wires to touch, and I put a little tiny bend in. Now when I push those bails up, that wire then will sit down there where they meet, and that is where I'm going to bind them together. So I'm going to put a bend in my half round wire. The inside of the bend is the flat, the outside is the domed, and I'm going to go over the top. That little bend is going to help me have something to pull against as I wrap around. Now don't worry if your first wrap is a little bit loose. We can always go back and tighten that up. And I think I'll probably just put 3. I don't have a lot of room. If you'd made a larger heart, you might find that you had more room. So you might want to do more wraps. So I'm going to go inside there now. So I don't need all this length. So I'm going to cut some of that off. There we go. Making sure that I keep my half round wire so that the flat side stays against the wire that I'm bending. I'm going to pass that through the back of the bails and then get hold and pull. Now, unlike thread, you can't pull this tight, so you've got to ease it. So I'm gripping and twisting so that it goes where I want it to go. Now, if it's not quite tight enough, I can pull it back, grip a little higher, and pull. So I'm pulling using the pliers against the framework of the pendant to actually get that a little tighter. And I'm going to go through again and get that nice and neat side by side. I'm just neatening up the top of the bails there. Because I use round nose pliers instead of parallel bail pliers, I want to finish that just inside there. You'll always get one side a little bit bigger than the other. I'm just loosening off the bottom end now, and I'm going back and tightening up. There's no doubt about it, if your bindings are really nice and neat, the whole piece of jewellery will look so much better. And it's really just to do with taking that little bit more time. Just going to even those bails up again. Like I said, that happened because round nose pliers of course taper, so one side is slightly larger than the other, but I will keep correcting that as I bind. So I'm going back through the bails again. Let's get another wrap around there. Press them down so that they're together. Pull them tight so that they're neat, so you're not getting any little lumps sticking out. Now I'm going to trim this so that when I press this little, can you see that little tiny end just there? It's just enough for it to go inside the bail. So I'm just easing that in, going down. You notice I aren't gripping it and pulling it, I'm pushing it, and that will go inside. Now the bottom wire, I'm just going to go around one more time. I've just got enough room above the heart, and then I'm going to go up the back and in the bails just like I did with the top end of the wire. So both ends are going to be tucked into the bails. If you say didn't have any 21 gauge wire and you were using 18, you could just cut this off and it would be fine. It would stay put. But because this is a finer gauge wire, I like it to be a little bit more secure. So I'm wrapping it in there. Now I want to finish it off like the other one so that we don't have any sharp points. So I pressed it in and then I'm just going in the side with my pliers and trimming it down. Okay. Make that top neater. There we are. Now the two wires that are sticking out down here, I can do different things with them. I could cut them off, get rid of them. I could make them part of the design, which I think is what I will do. So separate the two wires out. So just getting my fingernail between them and bending one to the left. And then I'm going to put a curl in it. So round nose pliers, grip the very, very end of the wire, and then I'm going to just curl it around. I'm sorry, I've gone out of shot here. Let me just get that back in. That's better for you to see. So I just made a curl with the end of the wire. It's quite a short wire. It's not going to snag on anything or catch. I'm not a great fan of doing loads of sort of loose spirals, but I found once they're contained within a frame like this, and they're quite small, they don't catch on anything. So I've got one on either side, which is rather symmetrical for me. Don't usually go for symmetrical, but anyway. Now I'm just going to get another piece of wire now, shortish length, and another. This is our bezel light setting. If I could get into the bag, honestly. I sometimes think they stick them up with super glue. Okay, bezel light setting. Once we have a stone for that, there we go. I've got a nice garnet here. You'll notice that there is a top and a bottom. The bottom's slightly thinner, the top looks like a little rub over setting. I'm going to drop the stone in so the point is facing upwards. And it just fits neatly in there. Can you see that? Can you just see a little point pointing up? Now, on the side of a bezel light setting, you have got 4 little tiny prongs that are not attached. With your pliers, you just go in and go push, and you just push the prong down. Now I'm going to go all the way around to the other side and do the opposite prong and just push it down really gently. There we go, little push. Then one of the ones at the side and push and around to the opposite one and push. Now you can make sure that these are all tightened in place. Don't push too hard. You're better off pushing several times gently than just giving it a huge squeeze, and you'll end up with a beautifully set stone with nice little holes in the back that you can use to thread onto wires. Now if you have any spare bits of square wire kicking around, this is an ideal time to use them up. I've just cut another piece off the reel, and I've probably got about, I don't know what, 3 inches there, something like that. And then you can see how that, whoops, falls off. It's not meant to fall off. It passes through quite easily, and then you can use that to sort of hold. It's going to misbehave, isn't it? Behave. Going. There we are. And it'll hold half of your stone in place. You could have it in the middle, but I've gone that symmetrical on this. I can't. I'm going to have to go off to one side or away to the side. Decide where you want your stone to be. Once you've decided where you'd like your stone to be, you can then start shaping up your piece of wire. So I'm just going to straighten this out a little bit, just using my thumb and finger. If you find this easier, you could do it with a silver cloth and straighten it out through that. I wouldn't suggest using your nylon jawed pliers if you have some, because it will really work and harden it, and then you'll find that you won't be able to get like a nice circular shape, which of course is what you want. When you want flow, you want a nice curl. So gripping the end of my round nose pliers, twisting with my right hand, but then just gently allowing the wire to flow over it. That will give you a loose curl. Now, if you're not so sure about loose curls, where shall I pop this now? Should I pop it in there? If you're not so sure, I do have a little tutorial video just on loose curls. I think I quite like it there. So what I did was I just bent that slightly with my finger, because I know where that is then going to meet with the framework, like that. So the curl's going to go in up near the top, near our other curl. And then we've got that lovely gentle sweep down to the frame. And I want my stone to be within that sweep there. Yeah, I kind of like that. So going back to our half round wire, our 21 gauge half round wire, I'm going to use this now to start and attach bits and pieces of wire in place. So I'm going to put my nice sharp bend in. So I have flat wire on the inside, domed wire over the top, and where I made that bend in the wire just there, I'm going to go over, I'm just going to take some of this length off, I don't need all that length. Using too much length to bind, you just end up making life difficult for yourself. So shorten it down, and I'll just squeeze that. I'm going nice and slowly. I want these to be nice and neat. There we go. Shall I add another one or shall I leave it at 2? And I think I'll add another. Alright, then let's just take this side back over the top. If I was to take another wrap around on the right hand side, which was the side that I started off, I'm going to get like a wide wrap where the wire's bending up. So that's why I went back to the start. And we'll wrap that around the back. And then I'm just going to trim off. By starting further down the wire, you do end up with little trim pieces, which then you have to put into your scrap pot and send back to wherever you bought your wire from, and they'll credit you with money for those. But it is better than trying to work on the very, very end of your wire, because working on the end of the wire is just so difficult. So I'm just going to pop my stone back where it ought to be. Flip that back over. Now I want my curl to sit against the edge of the heart. So that will need to be attached there. But the stone's also going to need to be attached as well. Now I've just moved that, it slipped slightly. So I'll get it back into position. And then we'll use some more of the half round wire. So I'm just seeing where it ought to be, where it ought to go. And I'm going to wrap this flat side down again, put a nice sharp bend in. Without that nice sharp bend, life is just too difficult. And I'm going in to the start of that curl. And I am binding that to the frame of the heart. So there goes the end of the wire through that little curl. I'll pull that nice and tight. You can't get away with one wrap. It will come undone. However, 2 upwards you're fine. So I do like to do 3 if I can get 3 in, but you can't always get 3 in and for it to look neat. So I've just chopped that off and I'm flattening it down. Okay, and then let's take that, make sure it's tight. I think I can actually get this to go around again. If I can, I will. Yeah, it will. Pop that in there. Although this pendant looks really, really simple, it actually takes quite a little bit of care. It's not that it's difficult, it's just that you have to take it nice and slowly and make sure everything's bound into place and it's nice and neat. Yeah, I'm liking the stone there, it looks quite sweet. Now, I can either work out where to put my stone or I can fasten that stone in place. Just getting some more half round wire. You could, I mean, I love to use the finer half round in binding. If you use thicker things, it sticks out and it becomes very, very noticeable. But this is a really good design for using up odds and ends. If you've got little pieces that are only sort of an inch and a half long, they're ideal for this. And this is, you know, where they sort of come in handy. I need to get this stone so it's still So I'm going to go through the framework of the stone. I don't know whether to go all the way from that side. If I go from that side and go all the way through, it may pull the stone downwards. So I'm just going to go in that edge now and around the framework. The stone is already supported at the other side because we threaded it onto the square wire. And then by putting the binding wire in this side, it will support the other side of the stone as well. Yeah, too much length. So let's get rid of some of this length. There we go. You may notice that I don't try and push the wire through when I'm binding at its highest point. I bend it so that the tip can be passed through quite neatly. What I'm trying to do is avoid work hardening the wire at the top, because the last thing you want it to do is actually snap off when you pull that tight. So I'm just wriggling that to make sure it's tight. That's it. And I'm going to trim that off so that it lays at the back along with everything else. We do like our backs to be as pretty as our fronts, but you've got to put the cut ends somewhere. Now, if that's actually okay, I'm just going to go with the other end and wrap that around as well. Because if you don't anchor both ends, there's no point in doing it. So there we go with the other end. Now, instead of wrapping around all the way over through that gap, I've just wrapped around the bit of wire that the stone was already sitting on. You know, the extra piece of wire that we'd put in. There we are. Now, our stone's nice and secure. I could do a tiny little curl now on the end of this wire and call it a day. I could bend it. I always bend from the top of the wire. It gives you a nicer curve. And I could put it into this corner, which is kind of nice, but it's also kind of lopsided. And although I really, really like it, it's symmetrical. So this is a larger one, just to give you an idea of what you can do with it, with two curls in it. And this is another neater, smaller one where I've sort of gone back and forth with the wires. So they always turn out different to our little hearts. So although I'm totally tempted to do that with it, I think it would probably just be me that liked that and not anybody else. So let's see if I bend the other way, what that would look like. Yes, okay. And that could go around into a circle. But no, I don't like that because it looks like it's got a nose at the bottom. Yeah. Problem is, once you've seen something like that, like a nose, let's see if I can just tighten it up a bit and see if it's lifted a little higher. It still looks the same. Let's up. No, can't see it. I know. If I take that piece there and I make that into a circle, there we go, just with my fingers, just bending the wire so it circles. I can then take this side up. It won't go as high as it did before, but that's okay. I can fasten that there. So I'm going to use my binding wire and I'm going to go through that circle because I kind of like that little one in the middle then. And I'm going to go through the circle and fasten that to the edge of the framework. Every time you do this, you're increasing the strength of the piece, because every time you're binding one piece of wire to another piece of wire, the piece of jewellery that you're working on is becoming stronger. when you're working with so little wire, because in effect so far all we've used is about 10 inches, one piece of wire 10 inches long, and some binding wire. So as a cost-effective piece to make, it really is, it's a nice one. And if you were to use birthstones in, that's make some great sellers. Also very, very popular at Valentine's are these. Let's just trim that end off. So great to use your scraps up. You don't have to use a bezel light if you don't want. We could have popped a bead on there, and you could have used a bead. So a nice, pretty Swarovski maybe in the birthstone colours would look great. Just evening up. There we go. Now I've got this tail end. What do I do with the tail end? I can finish it off up there. So I'm going to cut a little bit of it off. Just a little bit. I just had a little bit too much. And I can grip the end, and I'm going to put another loose spiral in. Just like we did when we first started. So I've gripped the end, I've twisted it round. You can see I'm twisting with my right hand and the pliers, but I'm supporting the wires with my left. There we go. Now does that fit in there? It does. Just move those a little closer together. And then I can put another binding wire through that circle as soon as I've got it all neat. I won't ever leave these unbound. I won't think, it'll be alright. Because, like I said right at the beginning, whereas they're okay when they're a tiny curl within a frame, if it's a bit bigger curl and it's loose, there is the possibility they could catch on something. And when I sell things, I always sell them with a lifetime guarantee. Well, my lifetime, I always tell them. Because I don't want things to go wrong for them. Therefore, when I'm making the jewellery, I try very hard to make sure that I've covered all eventualities. So if I've made sure that all the little pieces of wire are... Sorry, I don't want to go through there. There we go. If all the little pieces of wire are actually fastened down, bound, and are part of the structure of the piece, people then are not going to send it back. Well, unless they do things like... get bleach on it, which occasionally I've had silver pieces back that I've had bleach on. So let's just get that in there nice and tight. And once that's done, I can cut the end off and flatten that down. And we'll trim the other end and flatten that down. There we go. And so our heart's just about finished. Still not completely happy with the bail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the two wires slightly, just a little bit, round those pliers, and then I'm going to grip one wire and just twist slightly away from the other, and do the same on the other side. And you're curling the curve of the top of the bail, and it just makes a really pretty little flare out. And it means that if they weren't quite even, it totally disguises that. So that is our little heart pendant, and then we have give it a bit of a rub with the silver cloth, make it look a bit shinier. There we go. And we have the other two that I made, which is the slightly different ones, but that was what it had looked like on a chain. Very pretty. So whether you're making, if you want one with the curl on the bottom, I just thought I'd better show you how I did that. I just gripped the curl and I bent it with the round nose pliers just to make it skew to one side. And that's the bigger one. So big ones, small ones. I just hope you've enjoyed making it. Thank you very much for watching. Happy wrapping.